Part 2 of Things Fall Apart by CHINUA Achebe. Chapter 14. Okonko was well received by his mother's kinsmen in Bata. The old man who received him was his mother's younger brother, who was now the eldest surviving member of that family. His name was Uchendu, and it was he who had received Okonko's mother 20 and 10 years before, when she had been brought home from Omofia to be buried with her people. Okonko was only a boy then, and Uchendu still remembered him, crying the traditional farewell. "Mother, mother, mother is going." That was many years ago. Today, Okonko was not bringing his mother home to be buried with her people. He was taking his family of 3 wives and 11 children to seek refuge in his mother's land. As soon as Uchendu saw him with his sad and weary company, he guessed what had happened and asked no questions. It was not until the following day that Okonko told him the full story. The old man listened silently to the end and then said with some relief, "It is a female Ochu," and he arranged the requisite rites and sacrifices. Okonko was given a plot of ground on which to build his compound, and 2 or 3 pieces of land on which to farm during the coming planting season. With the help of his mother's kinsmen, he built himself an obi and 3 huts for his wives. He then installed his personal god and the symbols of his departed fathers. Each of Uchendu's 5 sons contributed 300 seed yams to enable their cousin to plant a farm. For as soon as the first rain came, farming would begin. At last the rain came. It was sudden and tremendous. For 2 or 3 moons the sun had been gathering strength till it seemed to breathe a breath of fire on earth. All the grass had long been scorched brown, and the sand felt like live coals to the feet. Evergreen trees wore a dusty coat of brown. The birds were silenced in the forest, and the world lay painting under the live, vibrating heat. And then came the clap of thunder. It was an angry, metallic, and thirsty clap, unlike the deep and liquid rumbling of the rainy season. A mighty wind arose and filled the air with dust. Palm trees swayed as the wind combed their leaves into flying crests like strange and fantastic coiffure. When the rain finally came, it was in large, solid drops of frozen water, which the people called the nuts of the water of heaven. They were hard and painful on the body as they fell. Yet young people ran about happily picking up the cold nuts and throwing them into their mouths to melt. The earth quickly came to life, and the birds in the forest fluttered around and chirped merrily. A vague scent of life and green vegetation was diffused in the air. As the rain began to fall more soberly and in small liquid drops, children sought for shelter, and all were happy, refreshed, and thankful. Okonko and his family worked very hard to plant a new farm, but it was like beginning life anew without the vigor and enthusiasm of youth, like learning to become left handed in old age. Work no longer had for him the pleasure it used to have, and when there was no work to do, he sat in a silent half sleep. His life had been ruled by a great passion to become one of the lords of the clan that had been his life spring, and he had all but achieved it. Then everything had been broken. He had been cast out of his clan like a fish onto a dry, sandy beach, panting. Clearly, his personal god or Ochi was not made for great things. A man could not rise beyond the destiny of his chi. The saying of the elders was not true, that if a man said yeah, his chi also affirmed. Here was a man whose chi said nay, despite his own affirmations. The old man Uchendu saw clearly that Okonko had yielded to despair, and he was greatly troubled. He would speak to him after the Isaifi ceremony. The youngest of Uchendu's 5 sons, Amiku, was marrying a new wife. The bride price had been paid, and all but the last ceremony had been performed. Amiku had his people had taken palm wine to the bride's kinmen about 2 months before Konko's arrival in Bata, and so it was time for the final ceremony of confession. The daughters of the family were all there, some of them having come a long way from their homes in distant villages. Uchendu's eldest daughter had come from Obodo, nearly half a day's journey away. The daughters of Uchendu's brothers were also there. It was a full gathering of Umwada, in the same way as they would meet if death occurred in the family. There were 22 of them. They sat in a big circle on the ground, and the bride sat in the center with a hen in her right hand. Uchendu sat by her, holding the central staff of the family. All the other men stood outside the circle watching. Their wives watched also. It was evening, and the sun was setting. Uchendu's eldest daughter Njide asked the questions. Remember, what if you do not answer truthfully, you will suffer or even die at childbirth, she began. How many men have lain with you since my brother first expressed the desire to marry you? None, she replied simply. Answer truthfully, argued the other woman. None, said Njide. None, she answered. Swear on this staff of my father's, said Uchendu. I swear, said the bride. Uchendu took the hen from her, slit its throat with a sharp knife, and allowed some of the blood to fall on his ancestral staff. From that day, Amiku took the young bride to his hut, and she became his wife. The daughters of the family did not return to their homes immediately, but spent 2 or 3 days with their kinsmen. On the second day, Uchendu called together his sons and daughters and his nephew, Okonko. The men brought their goatskin mats with which they sat on the floor, and the women sat on a sisal mat spread on a raised bank of earth. Uchendu pulled gently at his grey beard and gnashed his teeth. Then he began to speak, quietly and deliberately, picking his words with great care. It is the Congo that I primarily wish to speak to, he began. But I want all of you to note what I'm going to say. I'm an old man and you are all children. I know more about the world than any of you. If there is anyone among you who thinks he knows more, let him speak up. He paused, but no one spoke. Why is Okongo with us today? This is not his clan. We are only his mother's kinsmen. He does not belong here. He is an exile, condemned for 7 years to live in a strange land. And so, he is bored with grief. There is just one question I would like to ask him. Can you tell me, Okonko, why it is that one of the commonest names we give our children in Neka, or mother, is supreme? We all know that a man in the head is the head of the family and his wives do his bidding. A child belongs to its father and his family and not to its mother and her family. A man belongs to his fatherland and not to his motherland. And yet we say, Neka, mother is supreme. Why is that? There was silence. I want Okonko to answer me, said Ochendu. I do not know the answer, Okonko replied. You do not know the answer? So, you see that you are a child. You have many wives and many children, more children than I have. You are a great man in your clan, but you are still a child, my child. Listen to me and I shall tell you. But there is one more question I shall ask you. Why is it that when a woman dies, she's taken home to be buried with her own kinsmen? She is not buried with her husband's kinsmen. Why is that? Your mother was brought home to me and buried with my people. Why was that? Okonko shook his head. He does not know that either, said Uchendu, and yet he is full of sorrow because he has come to live in his motherland for a few years. He laughed a mirthless laughter and turned to his son and daughters. What about you? Can you answer my question? They all shook their heads. Then listen to me, he said and cleared his throat. It's true that a child belongs to its father, but when a father beats his child, it seeks sympathy and it's in its mother's heart. A man belongs to his fatherland when things are good and life is sweet, but when there is sorrow and bitterness, he finds refuge in his motherland. Your mother is there to protect you. She's buried here, and that is why we say that mother is supreme. Is it right that you, Okonko, should bring to your mother a heavy face and refuse to be comforted? Be careful, or you may displease the dead. Your duty is to comfort your wives and children and take them back to your fatherland after 7 years. But if you allow sorrow to weigh you down and kill you, they will all die in exile. He paused for a long while. These are now your kinsmen. He wept at his sons and daughters. You think you are the greatest sufferer in the world? Do you know that men are sometimes banished for life? Do you know that men sometimes lose all their yams and even their children? I had 6 wives once. I have none now, except that young girl who knows not her right from her left. Do you know how many children I have buried? Children I begot in my youth and strength. 22. I did not hang myself, and I'm still alive. If you think you are the greatest sufferer in the world, ask my daughter, Akweni, how many twins she has borne and thrown away. Have you not heard the song they sing when a woman dies? For whom it is well, for whom it is well. There is no one for whom it is well. I have no more to say to you. Chapter 15. It was in the second year of Okonko's exile that his friend Obireka came to visit him. He brought with him 2 young men, each of them carrying a heavy bag on his head. Okonko helped them put down their loads. It was clear that the bags were full of cowries. Okonko was very happy to receive his friend. His wives and children were very happy too, and so were his cousins and their wives when he sent for them and told them who his guest was. You must take him to salute our father, said one of the cousins. Yes, replied Okonko. We are going directly, but before they went, he whispered something to his first wife. She nodded, and soon children were chasing one of their cocks. Uchendu had been told by one of his grandchildren that 3 strangers had come to Okonko's house. He was therefore waiting to receive them. He held out his hands to them when they came into his obi, and after they had shaken hands, he asked Okonko who they were. This is Obirieka, my great friend. I have already spoken to you about him. Yes, said the old man. Turning to Obirieka, my son has told me about you, and I'm happy you have come to see us. I knew your father, Iweka. He was a great man. He had many friends here and came to see them quite often. Those were good days when a man and his friends in distant clans. You and your generation does not know that. You stay at home afraid of your next door neighbor. Even a man's motherland is strange to him nowadays. He looked at Okonko. I'm an old man and I like to talk. That is all. I'm good for now. He got up painfully, went into an inner room and came back with a coronet. Who are the young men with you? He asked as he sat down again on his goatskin. Okonko told him. Ah, he said, welcome, my sons. He presented the coronet to them, and when they had seen it and thanked him, he broke it, and they ate. Go into that room, he said to Okonko, pointing with his finger. You will find a bottle of wine there. Okonko brought the wine, and they began to drink. It was a day old and very strong. Yes, said Uchendu after a long silence. People traveled more in those days. There is not a single clan in these parts that I do not know very well. Aninta, Umwazu, Ikeocha, Ulemulu, Abame. I know them all. Have you heard, asked Obreka, that Abame is no more? How is that? Asked Uchendu and Okonko together. Abame has been wiped out, said Obereka. It is a strange and terrible story. If I had not seen the few survivors with my own eyes and heard their story with my own ears, I would not have believed. Was it not on an naked day that they fled into Umofia? He asked his two companions, and they nodded their heads. 3 months ago, said Obreka, on an Eke market day, a little band of fugitives came into our town. Most of them were sons of our land whose mothers had been buried with us. But there were some too who came because they had friends in our town, and others who could think of no else open to escape. And so they fled into Mafia with a awful story. He drank his palm wine, and Okonkwo filled his horn again. He continued, during the last planting season, a white man had appeared in their clan. An albino, suggested Okonkwo. He was not an albino. He was quite different. He sipped his wine, and he was riding an iron horse. The first people who saw him ran away, but he stood beckoning to them. In the end, the fearless ones were near and even touched him. The elders consulted their oracle, and it told them that the strange man would break their clan and spread destruction among them. Obreka again drank a little of his wine. And so they killed the white man and tied his iron horse to their sacred tree because it looked as if it would run away to call the man's friends. I forgot to tell you another thing which the oracle said. It said that other white men were on their way. They were locusts, it said, and that first man there, Harbinger, sent to explore the terrain, and so they killed him. What did the white man say before they killed him? Asked Uchendu. He said nothing, answered one of Oberka's companions. He said something, only they did not understand him, said Oberka. He seemed to speak through his nose. One of the men told me, said Oberka's other companion, that he repeated over and over again a word that resembled Mbaino. Perhaps he had been going to Mbaino and had lost his way. Anyway, resumed the breaker, they killed him and tied up his iron horse. This was before the planting season began. For a long time, nothing happened. The rains had come and yams had been sown. The iron horse was still tied to the sacred silk cotton tree. And then one morning, 3 white men led by a band of ordinary men like us came to the clan. They saw the iron horse and went away again. Most of the men and women of Abame had gone to their farms. Only a few of them saw these white men and their followers. For many market weeks, nothing else happened. They have a big market in Abame on every other Afro day. As you know, the whole clan gathers there. That was the day it happened. The 3 white men and a very large number of other men surrounded the market. They must have used a powerful medicine to make themselves invisible until the market was full, and they began to shoot. Everybody was killed, except the old and sick who were at home, and a handful of men and women whose chi were wide awake, and brought them out of the market. He paused. Their clan is now completely empty. Even the sacred fish in their mysterious lake have fled, and the lake was turned the color of blood. A great evil has come upon their land, as the oracle had warned. There were a long silence. Uchendu grounded his teeth together audibly, then he burst out. Never kill a man who says nothing. Those men of Abame were fools. What did they know about the man? He ground his teeth again and told a story to illustrate his point. Mother Kite once sent her daughter to bring food. She went and brought back a duckling. You have done very well, said Mother Kite to her daughter. But tell me, what did the mother of this duckling say when you swooped and carried its child away? It said nothing, replied the young kite. It just walked away. You must return the duckling, said Mother Kite. There is something ominous behind every silence, and so Daughter Kite returned the duckling and took a chick instead. What did the mother of the chick do? Asked the old kite. It cried and revved and cursed me, said the young kite. Then we can eat the chick, said her mother. There is nothing to fear from someone who shouts. Those men of Abame were fools. They were fools, said Okonkwo after a pause. They had been warned that danger was ahead. They should have armed themselves with their guns and their machetes, even when they went to the market. They had paid for their foolishness, said Obreka, but I'm greatly afraid. We have had stories about white men who made the powerful guns and the strong drinks and took slaves away across the seas. But no one thought the stories were true. There is no story that is not true, said Uchendu. The world has no end, and what is good among one people is an abomination with others. We have albinos among us. Do you not think that they came to our clan by mistake? That they have strayed from their ways to a land where everybody is like them? Okonkwo's first wife soon finished her cooking and set before their guests a big meal and pounded yams and bitter leaf soup. Okonkwo's son Nyowe brought in a pot of sweet wine tapped from the raffia palm. You are a big man now, Obreka said to Nyowe. Your friend Anene asked me to greet you. Is he well? Asked Nyowe. We are all well, said Obreka. Ezinma brought them a bowl of water with which to wash their hands. After that, they began to eat and to drink the wine. When did you set out from home? Asked Okonkwo. We had meant to set out from my house before cockcrow, said Obreka, but Nyweke did not appear until it was quite light. Never make an early morning appointment with a man who has just married a new wife. They all laughed. Has Nyweke married a wife? Asked Okonkwo. He has married Okadigo's second daughter, said Obreka. That is very good, said Okonkwo. I do not blame you for not hearing the cockcrow. When they had eaten, Obreka pointed at the two heavy bags. That is the money from your yams, he said. I sold the big ones as soon as he left. Later on, I sold some of the seed yams and gave out others to sharecroppers. I shall do that every year until you return. But I thought you would need the money now, and so I brought it. Who knows what may happen tomorrow? Perhaps green men will come to our clan and shoot us. God will not permit it, said Okonko. I do not know how to thank you. I can tell you, said Obreka. Kill one of your sons for me. That will not be enough, said Okonko. Then kill yourself, said Obreka. Forgive me, said Okonko, smiling. I shall not talk about thanking you anymore. Chapter 16. When nearly 2 years later, Obreka paid another visit to his friend in exile. The circumstances were less happy. The missionaries had come to Mofia. They had built their church there, won a handful of converts, and were already sending evangelists to the surrounding towns and villages. That was a source of great sorrow to the leaders of the clan. But many of them believed that the strange faith had and the white man's God would not last. None of his converts was man whose word was heeded in the assembly of the people. None of them was a man of title. They were mostly the kind of people that were called efulefu, worthless empty men. The imagery of an efulefu in the language of the clan was a man who sold his machete and wore the shelf to battle. Shelo, the priestess of Akbala, called the converts the excrement of the clan, and the new faith was a mad dog that had come to eat it up. What moved Obreka to visit Okonko was the sudden appearance of the latter's son, Nyoe, among the missionaries in Omofia. What are you doing here? Obreka had asked when, after many difficulties, the missionaries had allowed him to speak to the boy, and one of them replied Nyoe. How is your father? Obreka asked, not knowing what else to say. I don't know. He's not my father, said Nyoe unhappily. And so Obreka went to Mbata to see his friend, and he found that Okonko did not wish to speak about Nyoe. It was only from Nyoe's mother that he had scraps of the story. The arrival of the missionaries had caused a considerable stir in the village of Mbata. There were 6 of them, and one was white man. Every man and woman came out to see the white man. Stories about these strange men had grown since one of them had been killed in Abame and his iron horse tied to the sacred silk cotton tree. And so everybody came to see the white man. It was the time of the year when everybody was at home. The harvest was over. When they had all gathered, the white man began to speak to them. He spoke through an interpreter who was an able man. Though his dialect was different and harsh to the ears of Mbata, many people laughed at his dialect and the way he used words strangely. Instead of saying myself, he always said my buttocks. But he was a man of commanding presence, and the clansmen listened to him. He said he was one of them, as they could see from his color and his language. The other four black men were also their brothers, although one of them did not speak Igbo. The white man was also their brother because they were all sons of God. And he told them about his new God, the creator of all the world and all the men and women. He told them that they worshipped false gods, gods of the wood and stone. A deep murmur went through the crowd when he said this. He told them that the true God lived on high, and that all men, when they died, went before him for judgment. Evil men and all the heathen who in their blindness bowed to wood and stone were thrown into a fire that burned like palm oil. But good men who worshipped the true God lived forever in his happy kingdom. We have been sent by this great God to ask you to leave your wicked ways and false gods and turn to him so that you may be saved when you die, he said. Your buttocks understand our language, said someone lightheartedly, and the crowd laughed. What did he say? The white man asked his interpreter. But before he could answer, another man asked a question. Why is the white man's horse? He asked. The Igbo evangelists consulted among themselves and decided that the man probably meant bicycle. They told the white man, and he smiled benevolently. Tell them, he said, that I shall bring many iron horses when we have settled down among them. Some of them will even ride the iron horse themselves. This was interpreted to them, but very few of them had. They were talking excitedly among themselves because the white man had said he was going to live among them. They had not thought about that. At this point, an old man said he had a question. Which is this God of yours? He asked. The goddess of the earth, the god of the sky, a Madiora of the thunderbolt, or what? The interpreter spoke to the white man, and he immediately gave his answer. All the gods you have named are not gods at all. They are gods of deceit who tell you to kill your fellows and destroy innocent children. There is only one true God, and he has the earth, the sky, you and me and all of us. If we leave our gods and follow your God, asked another man, who will protect us from the anger of our neglected gods and ancestors? Your gods are not alive and cannot do you any harm, replied the white man. They are pieces of wood and stones. When this was interpreted to the men of Mbata, they broke into derisive laughter. These men must be mad, they said to themselves. How else could they say that Annie and Amadura were harmless, and Idemili and Ogungu too? And some of them began to go away. Then the missionaries burst into song. It was one of those gay and rollicking tunes of evangelism which had the power of plucking at silent and dusty chords in the heart of an Igbo man. The interpreter explained each verse to the audience, some of whom now stood enthralled. It was a story of brothers who lived in darkness and in fear, ignorant of the love of God. He told one of the sheep out on the hills, away from the gates of God and from the tender shepherd's care. After the singing, the interpreter spoke about the Son of God, whose name was Jesu Christi. Okonko, who only stayed in the hope that it might come to chasing the men out of the village, or whipping them, now said, "You told us with your own mouth that there was only one God. Now you talk about his son. He must have a wife then." The crowd agreed. "I did not say he had a wife," said the interpreter somewhat lamely. "Your buttock said he had a son," said the joker. "So he must have a wife, and all of them must have buttocks." The missionary ignored him and went on to talk about the Holy Trinity. At the end of it, Okonkwo was fully convinced that the man was mad. He shrugged his shoulders and went away to tap his afternoon palm wine. But there was a young lad who had been captivated. His name was Nyowe, Okonkwo's first son. It was not the mad logic of the Trinity that captivated him. He did not understand it. It was the poetry of the new religion. Something felt in the marrow. The hymn about brothers who sat in darkness and in fear seemed to answer a vague and persistent question that haunted his young soul. The question of the twins crying in the bush, and the question of Ikemefuna who was killed. He felt a relief within as the hymn poured into his parched soul. The words of the hymn were like the drops of frozen rain melting on the dry plate of the panting earth. Nyoe's callow mind was greatly puzzled. Chapter 17. The missionaries spent their first 4 or 5 nights in the marketplace and went into the village in the morning to preach the gospel. They asked who the king of the village was, but the villagers told them that there was no king. "We have men of high title and the chief priests and the elders," they said. It was not very easy getting the men of high title and elders together after the excitement of the first day. But the missionaries persevered, and in the end they were received by the rulers of Mbata. They asked for a plot of land to build their church. Every clan and village had its evil forest. In it were buried all those who died of the really evil diseases like leprosy and smallpox. It was also the dumping ground for the potent fetishes of great medicine men when they died. An evil forest was, therefore, alive with sinister forces and powers of darkness. It was such a forest that the rulers of Mbata gave to the missionaries. They did not really want them in their clan, and so they made them that offer which nobody in his right senses would accept. "They want a piece of land to build their shrine," said Uchendu to his peers when they consulted among themselves. "We shall give them a piece of land." He paused, and there was murmur of surprise and disagreement. "Let us give them a portion of the evil forest. They boast about victory over death. Let us give them a real battlefield in which to show their victory." They laughed and agreed and sent for the missionaries, whom they had asked to leave them for a while so they might whisper together. They offered them as much of the evil forest as they cared to take, and to their greatest amazement, the missionaries thanked them and burst into song. They do not understand, said some of the elders, but they will understand when they go to their plot of land tomorrow morning. And they dispersed. The next morning, the crazy men actually began to clear a part of the forest and to build their house. The inhabitants of Mbata expected them all to be dead within 4 days. The first day passed, and the second and third and fourth, and none of them died. Everyone was puzzled. And then it became known that the white man's fetish had unbelievable power. It was said that he wore glasses on his eyes so that he could see and talk to evil spirits. Not long after, he won his first 3 converts. Although Nyoe had been attracted to the new faith from the very first day, he kept it secret. He dared not to go too near the missionaries for fear of his father. But whenever they came to preach in the open marketplace or the village playground, Nyoe was there, and he was already beginning to know some of the simple stories they told. "We have now built a church," said Mr. Kiaga, the interpreter, who was now in charge of the infant congregation. The white man had gone back to Mofia, where he built his headquarters and from where he paid regular visits to Mr. Kiaga's congregation at Mbata. "We have now built a church," said Mr. Kiaga, "and we want you all to come in every 7th day to worship the true God." On the following Sunday, Nyoe passed and repassed the little red earth and thatch building without summoning enough courage to enter. He heard the voice of singing, and although it came from a handful of men, it was loud and confident. Their church stood on a circular clearing that looked like the open mouth of the evil forest. Was it waiting to snap its teeth together? After passing and repassing by the church, Noah returned home. It was well known among the people of Mbata that their gods and ancestors were sometimes long-suffering and would deliberately allow a man to go on defying them. But even in such cases, they set their limit at 7 market weeks or 28 days. Beyond that limit, no man was supposed to go, and so excitement mounted in the village as the 7th week approached, since the impudent missionaries built their church in the evil forest. The villagers were so certain about the doom that awaited these men, and 1 or 2 converts thought it wise to suspend their allegiance to the new faith. At last, the day came by which all the missionaries should have died, but they were still alive, building a new red earth and thatch house for their teacher, Mr. Kiaga. That week, they won a handful more converts, and for the first time they had a woman. Her name was Neka, the wife of Amadi, who was a prosperous farmer. She was very heavy with child. Neka had had 4 previous pregnancies and childbirths, but each time she had born twins, and they had been immediately thrown away. Her husband and his family were already becoming highly critical of such a woman and were not unduly perturbed when they found she had fled to join the Christians. It was good riddance. One morning, Okonko's cousin Amiku was passing by the church on his way from the neighboring villages when he saw Nyoe among the Christians. He was greatly surprised, and when he got home, he went straight to Okonko's hut and told him what he had seen. The woman began to talk excitedly, but Okonko sat unmoved. It was late afternoon before Nyoe returned. He went into the obi and saluted his father, but he did not answer. Nyoe turned around to walk into the inner compound when his father, suddenly overcome with fury, sprang to his feet and gripped him by the neck. "Where have you been?" he stammered. Nyoe struggled to free himself from the choking grip. "Answer me," roared Okonko, "before I kill you." He seized a heavy stick that lay on the dwarf wall and hit him 2 or 3 savage blows. "Answer me," he roared again. Nyoe stood looking at him and did not say a word. The women were screaming outside, afraid to go in. "Leave that boy at once," said a voice in the outer compound. It was Okonko's uncle, Chendu. "Are you mad?" Okonko did not answer, but he left hold on Nyoe, who walked away and never returned. He went back to the church and told Mr. Kiaga that he had decided to go to Umofia, where the white missionary had set up a school to teach young Christians to read and write. Mr. Chiaga's joy was very great. "Blessed is he who forsakes his father and his mother for my sake," he intoned. "Those that hear my words are my father and my mother." Nyoe did not fully understand, but he was happy to leave his father. He would return later to his mother and his brothers and sisters and convert them to the new faith. As Okonko sat gazing into a log fire, he thought over the matter. A sudden fury rose within him, and he felt a strong desire to take up his machete, go to the church and wipe out the entire vile and miscreant gang. But on further thought, he told himself that Nyoe was not worth fighting for. "Why," he cried in his heart, "should he, Okonko, of all people, be cursed with such a son?" He saw clearly in it the figure of his personal god Ochi, for how else could he explain his great misfortune and exile, and now his despicable son's behavior? Now that he had time to think of it, his son's crime stood out in its stark enormity. To abandon the gods of one's father and go about with a lot of effeminate men clacking like old hens was the very depth of abomination. Suppose when he died, all his male children decided to follow Nyoe's steps and abandon their ancestors. Okonko felt a cold shudder run through him at the terrible prospect, like the prospect of annihilation. He saw himself and his father crowding around their ancestral shrine, waiting in vain for worship and sacrifice, and finding nothing but ashes of bygone days. And his children, the while praying to the white man's God. If such a thing were ever to happen, he or Konko would wipe them off the face of the earth. Okonkwo was popularly called the Roaring Flame. As he looked into the log fire, he recalled the name. He was a flaming fire. How then could he have begotten a son like Nyoe, degenerate and effeminate? Perhaps he was not his son. No, he could not be. His wife had played him false. He would teach her, but Nyoe resembled his grandfather, Onoka, who was Okonkwo's father. He pushed the thoughts out of his mind. He, Okonkwo, was called a flaming fire. How could he have begotten a woman for a son? At Nyoe's age, Okonkwo had already become famous throughout Umofia for his wrestling and his fearlessness. He sighed heavily, and as if in sympathy, the smoldering log also sighed, and immediately Okonkwo's eyes were open and he saw the whole matter clearly. Living fire begets cold. Impotent ash, he sighed again deeply. Chapter 8. The young church in Mbata had a few crises early in its life. At first, the clan had assumed that it would not survive, but it had gone on living and gradually becoming stronger. The clan was worried, but not overmuch. If a gang of Efulefu decided to live in the evil forest, it was their own affair. When one came to think of it, the evil forest was a fit home for such undesirable people. It was true they were rescuing twins from the bush, but they never brought them into the village. As far as the villagers were concerned, the twins still remained where they had been thrown away. Surely the earth goddess would not visit the sins of the missionaries on the innocent villagers. But on one occasion, the missionaries had tried to overstep the bounds. 3 converts had gone into the village and boasted openly that all the gods were dead and impotent, and that they were prepared to defy them by burning all their shrines. "Go and burn your mother's genitals," said one of the priests. The men were seized and beaten until they streamed with blood. After that, nothing happened for a long time between the church and the clan. But stories were already gaining around that the white man had not only brought a religion, but also a government. It was said that they had built a place of judgment in Umofia to protect the followers of their religion. It was even said that they had hanged one man who killed a missionary. Although such stories were now often told, they looked like fairy tales in Mbata, and it did not as yet affect the relationship between New Church and the clan. There was no question of killing a missionary here, for Mr. Kiaga, despite his madness, was quite harmless. As for his converts, no one could kill them without having or flee from the clan, for in spite of their worthlessness, they still belonged to the clan. And so nobody gave serious thought to the stories about the white man's government or the consequences of killing the Christians. If they became more trouble, some than they already were, they could simply be driven out of the clan. And the little church was at that moment too deeply absorbed in its own troubles to annoy the clan. It all began over the question of admitting outcasts. These outcasts, or Osu, saying that the new religion welcomed twins and such abominations, thought that it was possible that they would also be received. And so, on Sunday, two of them went into the church. There was an immediate stir, but so great was the work the new religion had done among the converts that they did not immediately leave the church when the outcasts came in. Those who found themselves nearest to them merely moved to another seat. It was a miracle, but it only lasted till the end of the service. The whole church raised a protest and were about to drive these people out when Mr. Kiaga stopped them and began to explain. Before God, he said, there is no slave or free. We are all children of God. And we must receive these as our brothers. You do not understand, said one of the converts. What will the heathen say of us when they hear that we receive Osu into our midst? They will laugh. Let them laugh, said Mr. Kiaga. God will laugh at them on the judgment day. Why do the nations rage and the people imagine a vain thing? He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. You do not understand, the converts maintained. You are our teacher, and you can teach us the things of the new faith. But this is a matter which we know. And he told him that what an osu was. He was a person dedicated to a god, a thing set apart, a taboo forever, and his children after him. He would neither marry nor be married by the freeborn. He was, in fact, an outcast, living in a special area of the village, close to the great shrine. Whenever he went, he carried with him the mark of his forbidden caste. Long, tangled, and dirty hair, a razor was taboo to him, and also could not attend an assembly of the freeborn, and they, in turn, could not shelter under his roof. He could not take any of their four titles of the clan, and when he died, he was buried by his kind in the evil forest. How could such a man be a follower of Christ? He needs Christ more than you and I, said Mr. Kiaga. Then I shall go back to the clan, said the convert, and he went. Mr. Kiaga stood firm, and it was his firmness that saved the young church. The wavering converts drew inspiration and confidence from his unshakable faith. He ordered the outcasts to shave off their long, tangled hair. At first they were afraid they might die. Unless you shave off the mark of your heathen belief, I will not admit you into the church, said Mr. Kiaga. You fear that you will die. Why would that be? How are you different from other men who shave their hair? The same God created you and them. But they have cast you out like lepers. It is against the will of God, who has promised everlasting life to all who believed in his holy name. Thy heathen say you will die if you do this or that, and you're afraid. They also said I would die if I built my church on this ground. Am I dead? They said I would die if I took care of twins. I'm still alive. The heathen speak nothing about speak nothing but falsehood. Only the word of our God is true. The two outcasts shaved off their hair, and soon they were among the strongest adherents of the new faith. And what was more, nearly all the Osu in Bata followed their example. It was in fact one of them who, in his zeal, brought the church into serious conflict with the clan a year later by killing the sacred python, the emanation of the god of water. The royal python was the most revered animal in Bata and all the surrounding clans. It was addressed as our father and was allowed to go wherever it chose, even into people's beds. It ate rats in the house and sometimes swallowed hens' eggs. If a clansman killed a royal python accidentally, he made sacrifices of atonement and performed an expensive burial ceremony. Such was done for a great man. No punishment was prescribed for a man who killed the python knowingly. Nobody thought that such a thing would ever happen. Perhaps it never did happen. That was the way the clan at first looked at it. No one had actually seen the man do it. The story had risen among the Christians themselves, but all the same, the rules and elders of Mbata assembled to decide on their action. Many of them spoke at great length and in fury. The spirit of war was upon them. Okonko, who had begun to play a part in the affairs of his motherland, said that until the abominable gang was chased out of the village with whips, there would be no peace. But there were many others who saw the situation differently, and it was their counsel that prevailed in the end. It is not our custom to fight for our gods, said one of them. Let us not presume to do so now. If a man kills the sacred python in the secrecy of his heart, the matter lies between him and the god. We did not see it. If we put ourselves between the god and his victim, we may receive blows instead for the offender. When a man blasphemes, what do? We go and stop his mouth? No, we put our fingers into our ears to stop us hearing. That is a wise action. Let us not reason like cowards, said Okonko. If a man comes into my heart and defecates on the floor, what do? Do I shut my eyes? No, I take a stick and break his head. That is what a man does. These people are daily pouring filth over us, and Okeke says we should pretend not to see. Okonko made a sound full of disgust. This was a womanly clan, he thought. Such a thing could never happen in his fatherland or Mafia. Okonko has spoken the truth, said another man. We should do something, but let us ostracize these men. We would then not be held accountable for their abominations. Everybody in the assembly spoke, and in the end it was decided to ostracize the Christians. Okonko ground his teeth in disgust. That night, a bellman went through the length and breadth of Mbata, proclaiming that the adherents of the new faith were henceforth excluded from the life and privileges of the clan. The Christians had grown in number and were now a small community of men, women, and children, self-assured and confident. Mr. Brown, the white missionary, paid regular visits to them. When I think that it is only 18 months since the seed was first sown among you, he said, I marvel at what the Lord hath thought. It was Wednesday and a holy week, and Mr. Kiaga had asked the women to bring red earth and white chalk and water to scrub the church for Easter. And the women had formed themselves into 3 groups for this purpose. They set out early that morning, some of them with their water pots to the stream, another group with hose and baskets to the village red earth pit, and the others to the chalk quarry. Mr. Kiaga was praying in the church when he heard the women talking excitedly. He rounded off his prayer and went to see what it was all about. The women had come to the church with empty water pots. They said that some young men had chased them away from the stream with whips. Soon after, the women who had gone for red earth returned with empty baskets. Some of them had been heavily whipped. The chalk women also returned to tell a similar story. What does it all mean? Asked Mr. Kiaga, who was greatly perplexed. The village has outlawed us, said one of the women. The bellman announced it last night, but it is not our custom to debar anyone from the stream or the quarry. Another woman said, they want to ruin us. They will not allow us into the markets. They have said so. Mr. Kiaga was going to send into the village for his main convents when he saw them coming on their own. Of course, they had all heard the bellman, but they had never in all their lives heard of women being debarred from the stream. Come along, they said to the women. We will go with you to meet those cowards. Some of them had big sticks and some even machetes, but Mr. Kiaga restrained them. He wanted first to know why they had been outlawed. They said that Okoli killed the sacred python, said one man. It is false, said another. Okoli told me himself that it was false. Okoli was not there to answer. He had fallen ill on the previous night. Before the day was over, he was dead. His death showed that the gods were still able to fight their own battles. The clan saw no reason then for molesting the Christians. Chapter 19. The last big rains of the year were falling. It was the time of treading red earth with which to build walls. It was not done earlier because the rains were too heavy and would have washed away the heap of trodden earth. And it could not be done later because harvesting would soon set in, and after that the dry season. It was going to be Okonko's last harvest in Mbata. The 7 wasted and weary years were at last dragging to a close. Although he had prospered in his motherland, Okonko knew that he would have prospered even more in Umofia, in the land of his fathers, where men were bold and warlike. In these 7 years, he would have climbed to the utmost heights, and so he regretted every day of his exile. His mother's kinsmen had been very kind to him and he was grateful, but that did not alter the facts. He had called the first child born to him in exile Neka, Mother is Supreme, out of politeness to his mother's kinsmen. But 2 years later, when a son was born, he called him Nyofia, begotten in the wilderness. As soon as he entered his last year in exile, Okonkwo sent money to Obreka to build him 2 huts in his old compound, where he and his family would live until he built more huts on the outside wall of his compound. He could not ask another man to build his own obi for him, nor the walls of his compound. Those things a man built for himself or inherited from his father. As the last heavy rains of the year began to fall, Obereka sent word that the 2 huts had been built and Okonkwo began to prepare for his return. After the rains, he would have liked to return earlier and build his compound that year before the rain stopped. But in doing so, he would have taken something from the full penalty of 7 years, and that could not be. So he waited impatiently for the dry season to come. It came slowly. The rain came lighter and lighter until it fell in slanting showers. Sometimes the sun shone through the rain and a light breeze blew. It was a gay and airy kind of rain. The rainbow began to appear, and sometimes 2 rainbows, like a mother and her daughter, the one young and beautiful, and the other an old and faint shadow. The rainbow was called the python of the sky. Okonkwo called his 3 wives and told them to get things together for a great feast. I must thank my mother's kinsmen before I go, he said. Ikwefi still had some cassava left on her farm from the previous year. Neither of the other wives had. It was not that they had been lazy, but that they had many children to feed. It was therefore understood that Ikwefi would provide cassava for the feast. Nye's mother and Ojuugo would provide the other things like smoked fish, palm oil, and pepper for the soup. Okonkwo would take care of meat and yams. Ikwefi rose early on the following morning and went to her farm with her daughter Ezinma and Ojuugo's daughter Obiageli to harvest cassava tubers. Each of them carried a long cane basket, a machete for cutting down the soft cassava stem, and a little hoe for digging out the tuber. Fortunately, a light rain had fallen during the night, and the soil would not be very hard. It will not take us long to harvest as much as we like, said Ikwefi. But the leaves will be wet, said Ezinma. Her basket was balanced on her head, and her arms folded across her breasts. She felt cold. I dislike cold weather and water dropping on my back. We should have waited for the sun to rise and dry the leaves. Obiageli called her salt because she said she disliked water. Are you afraid you may dissolve? The harvesting was easy, as Ikwefi had said. Ezinma shook every tree violently with a strong stick before she bent down to cut the stem and dig out the tuber. Sometimes it was not necessary to dig. They just pulled the stump and earth rose. Roots snapped below and the tuber was pulled out. When they had harvested a sizable heap, they carried it down in 2 trips to the stream, where every woman had a swallow well for fermenting her cassava. It should be ready in 4 days or even 3, said Obiagali. They are young tubers. They are not all that young, said Ikwefi. I planted the farm nearly 2 years ago. It is a poor soil, and that is why the tubers are so small. Okonko never did things by halves. When his wife Ikwefi protested that 2 goats were sufficient for the feast, he told her that it was not her affair. I'm calling a feast because I have the wherewithal. I cannot live on the bank of a river and wash my hands with spittle. My mother's people have been good to me, and I must show my gratitude. And so 3 goats were slaughtered and a number of fowls. It was like a wedding feast. There was fufu and yam pottage, a goosey soup and bitter leaf soup, and pots of palm wine. All the Umuna were invited to the feast. All the descendants of Okolo, who had lived about 200 years before. The oldest member of this extensive family was Okongo's uncle, Uchendu. The kola nut was given to him to break, and he prayed to the ancestors. He asked them to health and children. We do not ask for wealth, because he that has health and children will also have wealth. We do not pray to have more money, but to have more kinsmen. We are better than animals because we have kinsmen. An animal rubs its aching flank against a tree. A man asked his kinsmen to scratch him. He prayed especially for Konko and his family. He then broke the kola nut and threw one of the lobes on the ground for the ancestors. As the broken kola nuts were passed around, Okonko's wives and children and those who came to help them with the cooking began to bring out the food. His sons brought out the pots of palm wine. There was so much food and drink that many kinsmen whistled in surprise. When all was laid out, Okonko rose to speak. I beg you to accept this little kola, he said. It is not to pay you back for all you did for me in these 7 years. A child cannot pay for its mother's milk. I have only called you together because it is good for kinsmen to meet. Yam pottage was served first because it was lighter than fufu, and because yam always came first. Then the fufu was served. Some kinsmen ate it with a goosey soup and others with bitter leaf. The meat was then shared so that every member of the Umuna had a portion. Every man rose in order of years and took a share. Even the few kinsmen who had not been able to come had their shares taken out for them in due turn. As the palm wine was drunk, one of the oldest members of the Umuna rose to thank Okonko. If I say that we did not expect such a big feast, I will be suggesting that we did not know how open-handed our son Okonko is. We all know him and we expected a big feast, but it turned out to be even bigger than we expected. Thank you. May all you took out return again tenfold. It is good in these days when the younger generation consider themselves wiser than their seers to see a man doing things in the grand old way. A man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. They all have food in their own homes. When we gather together in the moonlight, village ground, it is not because of the moon. Every man can see it in his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen to do so. You may ask why I'm saying all this. I say it because I fear for the younger generation. For you people, he waved his arms where most of the young men sat. As for me, I have only a short while to live, and so have Uchendu and Unachuchu and Imefo. But I fear for you young people because you do not understand how strong is the bond of kinship. You do not know what it is to speak with one voice and what is the result. An abominable religion has settled among you. A man can now leave his father and his brothers. He can curse the gods of his fathers and his ancestors, like a hunter's dog that suddenly goes mad and turns on his master. I fear for you. I fear for all the clan. He turned again to Okonkwo and said, "Thank you for calling us together." Part 3 of Things Fall Apart by CHINUA Achebe. 7 years was a long time to be away from one's clan. A man's place was not always there, waiting for him. As soon as he left, someone else rose and filled it. The clan was like a lizard. If it lost its tail, it soon grew another. Okonkwo knew these things. He knew that he had lost his place among the 9 masked spirits who had administered justice in the clan. He had lost the chance to lead his warlike clan against the new religion, which he was told had gained ground. He had lost the years in which he might have taken the highest titles in the clan. But some of these losses were not irreparable. He was determined that this return should be marked by his people. He would return with a flourish and regain the 7 wasted years. Even in his first year in exile, he had begun to plan for his return. The first thing he would do would be to rebuild a compound on a more magnificent scale. He would build his barn bigger than he had before, and he would build huts for 2 new wives. Then he would show his wealth by initiating his sons in the Ozo society. Only the really great men in the clan were able to do this. Okonkwo saw clearly the highest esteem in which he would be held, and he saw himself taking the highest title in the land. As the years of exile passed, one by one, it seemed to him that his chi might now be making amends for the past disaster. His yams grew abundantly, not only in his motherland, but also in Omofia, where his friend gave them out year by year to sharecroppers. When the tragedy of his first son had occurred, at first It appeared as if it might prove too great for his spirit, but it was a resilient spirit, and in the end Okonko overcame his sorrow. He had 5 other sons, and he would bring them up in the way of the clan. He sent for the 5 sons, and they came and sat in his obi. The youngest of them was 4 years old. You have all seen the great abomination of your brother. Now he is no longer my son or your brother. I will only have a son who is man, who will hold his head up among my people. If any one of you prefers to be a woman, let him follow Nyoe now while I'm alive, so that I can curse him. If you turn against me when I am dead, I will visit you and break your neck. Okonko was very lucky in his daughters. He never stopped regretting that Ezinma was a girl. Of all his children, she alone understood his every mood. A bond of sympathy had grown between them as the years had passed. Ezinma grew up in her father's exile and became one of the most beautiful girls in Mbata. She was called Crystal of Beauty, as her mother had been called in her youth. The young ailing girl who had caused her mother so much heartache had been transformed almost overnight into a healthy, buoyant maiden. She had, it was true, her moments of depression when she would snap at everybody like an angry dog. These moods descended on her suddenly and for no apparent reason, but they were very rare and short-lived. As long as they lasted, she could bear no other person but her father. Many young men and prosperous middle-aged men of Mbata came to marry her, but she refused them all because her father had called her one evening and said to her, "There are many good and prosperous people here, but I shall be happy if you marry in Umofia when we return home." That was all he had said, but Ezinma had seen clearly all the thought and hidden meaning behind the few words, and she had agreed. "Your half-sister Obiagali will not understand me," Okonko said, "but you can explain to her." Although they were almost the same age, Ezinma wielded a strong influence over her half-sister. She explained to her why they should not marry yet, and she agreed also. And so the two of them refused every offer of marriage in Mbata. "I wish she were a boy," Okonko thought within himself. She understood things so perfectly. Who else among his children could have read his thoughts so well? With 2 beautiful grown-up daughters, his return to Mofia would attract considerable attention. His future sons-in-law would be men of authority in the clan. The poor and unknown would not dare to come forth. Umofia had indeed changed during the 7 years Okonko had been in exile. The church had come and led many astray, not only the low-born and the outcast, but sometimes a worthy man had joined it. Such a man was Ugwefi Ugona, who had taken 2 titles, and who, like a madman, had cut the anklet of his titles and cast it away to join the Christians. The white missionary was very proud of him, and he was one of the first men in Umofia to receive the sacrament of Holy Communion, or Holy Feast as it was called in Igbo. Obwefi Gona had thought of the feast in terms of eating and drinking, only more holy than the village variety. He had therefore put his drinking horn into his goatskin bag for the occasion. But apart from the church, the white men had also brought a government. They had built a court where the district commissioner judged cases in ignorance. He had court messengers who brought men to him for trial. Many of these messengers came from Umuru, on the bank of the Great River, where the white men first came many years before, and where they had built the center of their religion and trade and government. These court messengers were greatly hated in Omofia because they were foreigners and also arrogant and high-handed. They were called Kotma, and because of their ash-colored shorts, they earned the additional name of ash buttocks. They guarded the prison, which was full of men who had offended against the white man's law. Some of these prisoners had thrown away their twins, and some had molested the Christians. They were beaten in the prison by the Kotma and made to work every morning clearing the government compound and fetching wood for the white commissioner and the court messengers. Some of these prisoners were men of title who should be above such mean occupation. They were grieved by the indigeneity and mourned for their neglected farms. As they cut grass in the morning, the young men sang in time with the strokes of their machetes. Kotma of the ash buttocks. He is fit to be a slave. The white man has no sense. He is fit to be a slave. The court messengers did not like to be called ash buttocks, and they beat the men. But the song spread in Omofia. Okonko's head was bowed in sadness as Obreka told him these things. Perhaps I have been away too long, Okonko said, almost to himself, but I cannot understand these things. You tell me, what is it that has happened to our people? Why have they lost the power to fight? Have you not heard how the white man wiped out Abame? Asked Obreka. I have heard, said Okonko, but I have also heard that Abame people were weak and foolish. Why did they not fight back? Had they no guns and machetes, we would be cowards to compare ourselves with the men of Abame. Their fathers had never dared to stand before the ancestors. We must fight these men and drive them from the land. It is already too late, said Obreka. Sadly, our own men and our sons have pinned the ranks of the stranger. They have joined his religion and they help to uphold his government. If we should try to drive out the white men in Omofia, we should find it easy. There are only 2 of them, but what of our own people who are following their way and have been given power? They would go to Umuru and bring the soldiers, and we would be like Abame. He paused for a long time and then said, I told you on my last visit to Mbata how they hanged Aneto. What happened to the piece of land in dispute? Asked Okonko. The white man's court has decided that it should belong to Nama's family, who had given much money to the white man's messengers and interpreter. Does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he when he does not even speak our tongue? But he says that our customs are bad, and our own brothers who have taken up his religion also say that our customs are bad. How do you think we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came quietly and peaceably with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. How did they get hold of Aneto to hang him as Tokonko? When he killed Oduche in the fight over the land, he fled to Anita to escape the wrath of the earth. This was about 8 days after the fight. Because Oduche had not died immediately from his wounds, it was on the 7th day that he died. But everybody knew that he was going to die, and Aneto got his belongings together in readiness to flee. But the Christians had told the white man about the accident, and he sent his courtman to catch Aneto. He was imprisoned with all the leaders of his family. In the end, Oduche died, and Aneto was taken to Umuru and hanged. The other people were released, but even now they have not formed the mouth with which to tell of their suffering. The two men sat in silence for a long while afterwards. Chapter 21. There were many men and women in Umuofia who did not feel as strongly as Okonkwo about the new dispensation. The white man had indeed brought a lunatic religion, but he had also built a trading store, and for the first time palm oil and keno became things to great price, and much money flowed into Umuofia. And even in the matters of religion, there was a growing feeling that there might be something in it after all. Something vaguely akin to method in the overwhelming madness. The growing feeling was due to Mr. Brown, the white missionary, who was very firm in restraining his flock from provoking the wrath of the clan. One member in particular was very difficult to restrain. His name was Enoch, and his father was the priest of the snake cult. The story went around that Enoch had killed and eaten the sacred python, and that his father had cursed him. Mr. Brown preached against such excess of zeal. Everything was possible, he told his energetic flock, but everything was not expedient. And so Mr. Brown came to be respected even by the clan, because he trod softly on its faith. He made friends with some of the great men of the clan, and on one of his frequent visits to the neighboring villages, he had been presented with a carved elephant tusk, which was a sign of dignity and rank. One of the great men in that village was called Akuna, and he had given one of his sons to be taught the white man's knowledge in Mr. Brown's school. Whenever Mr. Brown went to the village, he spent long hours with Akuna in his obi, talking through and interpreting about religion. Neither of them succeeded in converting the other, but they learned more about their different beliefs. You say that there is one supreme God who made heaven and earth, said Akuna on one of Mr. Brown's visits. We also believe in him and call him Chuku. He made all the world and the other gods. There are no other gods, says Mr. Brown. Chuku is the only God, and all others are false. You carve a piece of wood like that one. He pointed at the rafters from which Akuna's carved ikenga hung, and you call it a god. But it is still a piece of wood. Yes, said Akuna, it is indeed a piece of wood. The tree from which it came was made by Chuku, as it indeed all minor gods were. But he made them for his messengers, who that so that we could approach him through them. It is like yourself, you are the head of your church. No, protested Mr. Brown. The head of my church is God Himself. I know, said Akuna, but there must be a head in this world among men. Somebody like yourself must be the head here. The head of my church in that sense is in England. That is exactly what I'm saying. The head of your church is in your country. He has sent you here as his messenger, and you have also appointed your own messengers and servants. Or let me take another example. The district commissioner, he is sent by your king. They have a queen, said the interpreter on his own account. Your queen sends her messengers. The district commissioner, he finds that he cannot do the work alone, and so he appoints Kotma to help him. It is the same with God or Chuku. He appoints the smaller gods to help him because his work is too great for one person. You should not think of him as a person, said Mr. Brown. It is because you do so that you imagine he must need helpers. And the worst thing about it is that you give all the worship to the false gods you have created. That is not so. We make sacrifices to the little gods, but when they fail and there is no one else to turn, we go to Chuku. It is right to do so. We approach a great man through his servants, but when his servants fail to help us, then we go to the last source of hope. We appear to pay great attention to the little gods, but that is not so. We worry them more because we are afraid to worry their master. Our fathers knew that Chuku was the overlord, and that is why many of them gave their children the name Chuku. Chuku is supreme. You said one interesting thing, said Mr. Brown. You are afraid of Chuku. In my religion, Chuku is loving Father and needs to be feared by those who do and need not be feared by those who do his will. But we must fear him because we are not doing his will, said Akuna. And who is to tell his will? It is too great to be known. In this way, Mr. Brown learned a good deal about the religion of the clan, and he came to the conclusion that a frontal attack on it would not succeed. And so he built a school and a little hospital in Omofia. He went from family to family begging people to send their children to his school. But at first, they only sent their slaves or sometimes their lazy children. Mr. Brown begged and argued and prophesied. He said that the leaders of the land in the future would be men and women who have learned to read and write. If Umofia failed to send her children to the school, strangers would come from other places to rule them. They could already see that happening in the native court where the DC was surrounded by strangers who spoke his tongue. Most of these strangers came from the distant town of Umuru on the bank of the Great River, where the white man first went. In the end, Mr. Brown's argument began to have an effect. More people came to learn in his school, and he encouraged them with gifts or singlets and towels. They were not all young, these people who came to learn. Some of them were 30 years old or more. They worked on their farms in the morning and went to school in the afternoon. And it was not long before people began to say that white man's medicine was quick in working. Mr. Brown's school produced quick results. A few months in it were enough to make one a court messenger or even a court clerk. Those who stayed longer became teachers, and from Umofia, laborers went forth into the Lord's vineyard. New churches were established in the surrounding villages, and a few schools with them. From the very beginning, religion and education went hand in hand. Mr. Brown's mission grew from strength to strength, and because of its link with the new administration, it earned a new school prestige. But Mr. Brown himself was breaking down in health. At first, he ignored the warning signs, but in the end, he had to leave his flock sad and broken. It was in the first rainy season after Conco's return to Mofia that Mr. Brown left for home. As soon as he had learned of Okonko's return 5 months earlier, the missionary had immediately paid him a visit. He had just sent Okonko's son, Nyoe, who was now called Isaac, to the new training college for teachers in Omuru, and he had hoped that Okonko would be happy to hear of it. But Okonko had driven him away with the threat that if he came into his compound again, he would be carried out of it. Okonko's return to his native land was not as memorable as he had wished. It was true his 2 beautiful daughters aroused great interest among suitors, and marriage negotiations were soon in progress. But beyond that, Omofia did not appear to have taken any special notice of the warrior's return. The clan had undergone such profound change during his exile, and it was barely recognizable. The new religion and government and the trading stores were very much in the people's eyes and minds. There were still many who saw these new institutions as evil, but even they talked and thought about little else, and certainly not about Okonko's return. And it was the wrong year too. If Okonko had immediately initiated his 2 sons into the Ozo Society, he had planned he would have caused a stir. But the initiation rite was performed once in 3 years in Omofia, and he had to wait for nearly 2 years for the next round of ceremonies. Okonko was deeply grieved, and it was not just a personal grief. He mourned for the clan, which he saw breaking up and falling apart, and he mourned for the warlike men of Omofia, who had so unaccountably become soft like women. Chapter 22. Mr. Brownie's successor was the Reverend James Smith, and he was a different kind of man. He condemned openly Mr. Brown's policy of compromise and accommodation. He saw things as black and white, and black was evil. He saw the world as a battlefield in which the children of light were locked in mortal conflict with the sons of darkness. He spoke in his sermons about sheep and goats and about wheat and tares. He believed in slaying the prophets of Baal. Mr. Smith was greatly distressed by the ignorance which many of his flock showed even in such things as the Trinity and the sacraments. It only showed that they were seeds sown on a rocky soil. Mr. Brown had thought of nothing but numbers. He should have known that the kingdom of God did not depend on large crowds. But Lord himself stressed the importance of fewness. Narrow is the way, and few the number. To fill the Lord's holy temple with an idolatrous crowd, clamoring for signs, was a folly of everlasting consequence. Our Lord used the whip only once in his life to drive the crowd away from his church. Within a few weeks of his arrival in Umofia, Mr. Smith suspended a young woman from the church for pouring new wine into old bottles. This woman had allowed her hither husband to mutilate her dead child. The child had been declared an Ogbanje, plaguing its mother by dying and entering her womb to be born again. 4 times this child had run its evil round, and so it was mutilated to discourage it from returning. Mr. Smith was filled with wrath when he heard of this. He disbelieved the story, which even some of the most faithful confirmed. The story of really evil children who were not deterred by mutilation, but came back with all the scars. He replied that such stories were spread in the world by the devil to lead men astray. Those who believed such stories were unworthy of the Lord's table. There was a saying in Umofia that as a man danced, so the drums were beaten for him. Mr. Smith danced a furious step, and so the drums went mad. The overzealous convents who had smarted under Mr. Brown's restraining hand now flourished in full favor. One of them was Enoch, the son of the snake priest, who was believed to have killed and eaten the sacred python. Enoch's devotion to the new faith had seemed so much greater than Mr. Brown's that the villagers called him the outsider who wept louder than the bereaved. Enoch was short and light and slight of build, and always seemed in great haste. His feet were short and broad, and when he stood or walked, his heels came together, and his feet opened outwards as if they had quarreled and meant to go in different directions. Such was the excessive energy bottled up in Enoch's small body that it was always erupting in quarrels and fights. On Sundays, he always imagined that the sermon was preached for the benefit of his enemies. And if he happened to sit near one of them, he would occasionally turn to give him a meaningful look, as if to say, "I told you so." It was Enoch who touched off the great conflict between church and clan in Umofia, which had been gathering since Mr. Brown left. It happened during the annual ceremony, which was held in honor of the earth deity. At such times, the ancestors of the clan who had been committed to Mother Earth at their death emerged again as a gugu through tiny antholes. One of the greatest crimes a man could commit was to unmask an egungu in public, or to say or do anything which might reduce its immortal prestige in the eyes of the uninitiated. And this was what Enoch did. The annual worship of the earth goddess fell on a Sunday, and the masked spirits were abroad. The Christian women who had been to church could not therefore go home. Some of their men had gone out to beg the Gugu to retire for a short while for the women to pass. They agreed and were already retiring when Enoch boasted aloud that they would not dare to touch a Christian. Whereupon they all came back, and one of them gave Enoch a good stroke of the cane, which was always carried. Enoch fell on him and tore off his mask. The other Gugu immediately surrounded their desecrated companion to shield him from the profane gaze of women and children and led him away. Enoch had killed an ancestral spirit, and Umofia was thrown into confusion. That night, the mother of the spirits walked the length and breadth of the clan, weeping for her murdered son. It was a terrible night. Not even the oldest man in Omofia had ever heard such a strange and fearful sound, and it was never to be heard again. It seemed as if the very soul of the tribe wept for a great evil that was coming, its own death. On the next day, all the Mastegugu of Umofia assembled in the marketplace. They came from all the quarters of the clan and even from the neighboring villages. They dreaded Otakagu, came from Imo, and Ekwensu, dangling a white cock, arrived from Uli. It was a terrible gathering. The eerie voices of countless spirits, the bells that clattered behind some of them, and the clash of machetes as they ran forwards and backwards and saluted one another, sent tremors of fear into every heart. For the first time in living memory, the sacred bull roar was heard in broad daylight. From the marketplace, the furious band made for Enoch's compound. Some of the elders of the clan went with them, wearing heavy protection of charms and amulets. These were men whose arms were strong in ogu or medicine. As for the ordinary men and women, they listened from the safety of their hearts. The elders of the Christians had met together at Mr. Smith's parsonage on the previous night. As they deliberated, they could hear the mother of spirits wailing for her son. The chilling sound affected Mr. Smith, and for the first time he seemed to be afraid. "What are they planning to do?" he asked. No one knew, because such a thing had never happened before. Mr. Smith would have sent for the district commissioner and his court messengers, but they had gone on a tour on the previous day. "One thing is clear," said Mr. Smith. "We cannot offer physical resistance to them. Our strength lies in the Lord." They knelt down together and prayed to God for delivery. "O Lord, save thy people," cried Mr. Smith, "and bless thine inheritance," replied the men. They decided that Enoch should be hidden in the parsonage for a day or two. Enoch himself was greatly disappointed when he heard this, for he had hoped that a holy war was imminent, and there were a few Christians who thought like him, but wisdom prevailed in the camp, for the faithful and many lives were thus saved. The band of Egugu moved like a furious whirlwind to Enoch's compound, and with machete and fire reduced it to a desolate heap. And from there they made for the church, intoxicated with destruction. Mr. Smith was in church when he heard the masked spirits coming. He walked quietly to the door which commanded the approach to the church compound and stood there. But when the first 3 or 4 Egugu appeared on the church compound, he nearly bolted. He overcame this impulse, and instead of running away, he went down the 2 steps and led up to the church and walked toward the approaching spirits. They surged forward, and a long stretch of the bamboo fence with which the church compound was surrounded gave way before them. Discordant bells clanged, machetes clashed, and the air was full of dust and the weird sounds. Mr. Smith heard the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw Okeke, his interpreter. Okeke had not been on the best of terms with his master since he had strongly commended Enoch's behavior at the meeting of the leaders of the church during the night. Okeke had gone as far as to say that Enoch should not be hidden in the parsonage because he would only draw the wrath of the clan on the pastor. Mr. Smith had rebuked him in a very strong language and had not sought his advice that morning. But now, as he came up and stood behind him, comforting the angry spirits, Mr. Smith looked at him and smiled. It was a wan smile, but there was deep gratitude there. For a brief moment, the onrush of the Gugu was checked by the unexpected composure of the two men. But it was only a momentary check, like the tense silence between blasts of thunder. The second onrush was greater than the first. It swallowed up the two men. Then an unmistakable voice rose above the tumult, and there was immediate silence. Space was made around the two men, and Ajofia began to speak. Ajofia was the leading Egugu of Umofia. He was the head and spokesman of the 9 ancestors who administered justice in the clan. His voice was unmistakable, and so he was able to bring immediate peace to the agitating spirits. He then addressed Mr. Smith, and as he spoke, clouds of smoke rose from his head. "The body of the white man, I salute you," he said, using the language in which immortals spoke to men. "The body of the white man, do you know me?" he asked. Mr. Smith looked at his interpreter, but Okeke, who was a native of distant Umuru, was also at a loss. Ajofia laughed in his guttural voice. It was like the laugh of rusty metal. "They are strangers," he said, "and they are ignorant. But let that pass." He turned around to his comrades and saluted them, calling them the fathers of Umofia. He dug his rattling spear into the ground, and it shook with metallic life. Then he turned once more to the missionary and his interpreter. "Tell the white man that we will not do him any harm," he said to the interpreter. "Tell him to go back to his house and leave us alone. We liked his brother who was with us before. He was foolish, but we liked him, and for his sake we shall not harm his brother. But this shrine which he built must be destroyed. We shall no longer allow it in our midst. It has bred untold abominations, and we have come to put an end to it." He turned to his comrades. "Fathers of Umofia, I salute you." And they replied with one guttural voice. He turned again to the missionary. "You can stay with us if you like our ways. You can worship your own God. It is good that a man should worship the gods and the spirits of his fathers. Go back to your house so that you may not be hurt. Our anger is great, but we have held it down so that we can talk to you." Mr. Smith said to his interpreter, "Tell them to go away from here. This is the house of God, and I will not live to see it desecrated." Okeke interpreted wisely to the spirits and leaders of Umofia. "The white man says he is happy. You have come to him with your grievances, like friends. He will be happy if you leave the matter in his hands. We cannot leave the matter in his hands because he does not understand our customs. Just as we do not understand his, we say he is foolish because he does not know our ways. And perhaps he says we are foolish because we do not know his. Let him go away. Mr. Smith stood his ground, but he could not save his church when the Gugu went away. The red earth church which Mr. Brown had built was a pile of earth and ashes, and for the moment the spirit of the clan was pacified. Chapter 23. For the first time in many years, Okonkwo had a feeling that was akin to happiness. The times which had altered so unaccountably during his exile seemed to be coming round again. The clan which had turned false on him appeared to be making amends. He had spoken violently to his clansmen when they had met in the marketplace to decide on their action, and they had listened to him with respect. It was like the good old days again, when a warrior was a warrior. Although they had not agreed to kill the missionary or drive away the Christians, they had agreed to do something substantial, and they had done it. Okonkwo was almost happy again. For 2 days after the destruction of the church, nothing happened. Every man in Umofia went about armed with a gun or machete. They would not be caught unawares like the men of Abame. Then the district commissioner returned from his tour. Mr. Smith went immediately to him and they had a long discussion. The men of Umofia did not take any notice of this, and if they did, they thought it was not important. The missionary often went to see his brother, white man. There was nothing strange in that. 3 days later, the district commissioner sent his sweet-tongued messenger to the leaders of Umofia, asking them to meet him in his headquarters. That also was not strange. He often asked them to hold such palavers, as he called them. Okonkwo was among the 6 leaders he invited. Okonkwo warned the others to be fully armed. An Umofia man does not refuse a call. He said, he may refuse to do what he is asked. He does not refuse to be asked. But the times have changed and we must be fully prepared. And so the 6 men went to see the district commissioner, armed with their machetes. They did not carry guns, for that would be unseemly. They were led into the courthouse where the district commissioner sat. He received them politely. They unslung their goatskin bags and their shelf machetes, put them on the floor and sat down. I have asked you to come, began the commissioner, because of what happened during my absence. I have been told a few things, but I cannot believe them until I have heard your own side. Let us talk about it like friends and find a way of ensuring that it does not happen again. Ogbuefi Ekuweme rose to his feet and began to tell the story. Wait a minute, said the commissioner. I want to bring in my men so that they too can hear your grievances and take warning. Many of them came from distant places, and although they speak your tongue, they are ignorant of your customs. James, go and bring in the men. His interpreter left the courtroom and soon returned with 12 men. They sat together with the men of Omofia, and Obwefi Ekewum began again to tell the story of how Enoch murdered Anegungu. It happened so quickly that the 6 men did not see it coming. There was only a brief scuffle, too brief even to allow the drawing of a sheathed machete. The 6 men were handcuffed and led into the guardroom. "We shall not do you any harm," said the district commissioner to them later, "if only you agree to cooperate with us. We have brought a peaceful administration to you and your people, so that you may be happy. If any man ill treats you, we shall come to your rescue, but we will not allow you to ill treat others. We have a court of law where we judge cases and administer justice, just as it is done in my own country, and a great queen. I have brought you here because you joined together to molest others, to burn people's houses and their places of worship. That must not happen in the dominion of our queen, the most powerful ruler in the world. I have decided that you will pay a fine of 200 bags of curries. You will be released as soon as you agree to this and undertake to collect that fine from your people. What do you say to that?" The 6 men remained silent, and the commissioner left them for a while. He told the court messenger when he left the guardroom to treat the men with respect because they were the leaders of Omofia. They said, "Yes, sir," and saluted. As soon as the district commissioner left, the head messenger, who was also the prisoner's barber, took down his razor and shaved off all the hair of the men's heads. They were still handcuffed, and they just sat and mopped. "Who is the chief among you?" the court messenger asked in jest. "We see that every papa wears the anklet of a title in Omofia. Does it cost as much as 10 curries?" The 6 men ate nothing throughout the day and the next. They were not even given any water to drink, and they could not go out to urinate or go into the bush when they were pressed. At night, the messengers came in to taunt them and to knock their shaven heads together. Even when the men were left alone, they found no words to speak to one another. It was only on the third day, when they could no longer bear the hunger and the insults, that they began to talk about giving in. "We should have killed the white man if you had listened to me," Okonko sneered. "We could have been in Umuru now, waiting to be hanged," someone said to him. "Who wants to kill the white man?" asked a messenger who had just rushed in. Nobody spoke. "You are not satisfied with your crime, but you must kill the white man on top of it." He carried a strong stick and he hit each man a few blows on the head and back. Okonko was choked with hate. As soon as the 6 men were locked up, court messengers went into Umofia to tell the people that their leaders would not be released unless they paid a fine of 250 bags of curry. "Unless you pay the fine immediately," said their headman, "we will take your leaders to Umuru before the big white man and hang them." This story spread quickly through the villages and was added to as it went. Some said that the men had already been taken to Umuru and would be hanged on the following day. Some said that their families would also be hanged. Others said that the soldiers were already on their way to shoot the people of Umofia
as they had done in Abame. It was the time of the full moon, but the night the voice of children was not heard. The village Ilo, where they always gathered for a moon play, was empty. The women of Egudu did not meet in their sacred enclosure to learn a new dance to be displayed later on the village Ilo. Young men who were always abroad in the moonlight kept on their hats that night. Their manly voices were not heard on the village paths as they went to visit their friends and lovers. Omofia was like a startled animal with ears erect, sniffing the silent, ominous air and not knowing which way to run. The silence was broken by the village crier beating his sonorous ogene. He called every man in Omofia from the Akakanme age group upwards to a meeting in the marketplace after the morning meal. He went from one end of the village to the other and walked all its breadth. He did not leave out any of the main footpaths. Okonko's compound was like a deserted homestead. It was in cold water. It was as if cold water had been poured on it. His family was all there, but everyone spoke in whispers. His daughter Zinma had broken her 28th-day visit to the family of her future husband and returned home when she heard that her father had been imprisoned and was going to be hanged. As soon as she got home, she went to Obreka to ask what the men of Omofia were going to do about it. But Obreka had not been home since morning. His wives thought he had gone to a secret meeting. Zinma was satisfied that something was being done. On the morning after the village's criers' appeal, the men of Omofia met in the marketplace and decided to collect without delay 250 bags of curries to appease the white man. They did not know that 50 bags would go to the court messenger who had increased the fine for that purpose. Chapter 24. Okonko and his fellow prisoners were set free as soon as the fine was paid. The district commissioner spoke to them again about the great queen and about peace and good government. But the men did not listen. They just sat and looked at him and at his interpreter. In the end, they were given back their bags and sheathed machetes and told to go home. They rose and left the courthouse. They neither spoke to anyone or among themselves. The courthouse, like the church, was built a little away outside the village. The footpaths that linked them was a very busy one because it also led to the stream beyond the court. It was open and sandy. Footpaths were open and sandy in the dry season, but when the rains came, the bush grew thick on either side and closed in on the path. It was now the dry season. As they made their way to the village, the 6 men met women and children going to the stream with their water pots. But the men wore such heavy and fearsome looks that the women and children did not say no or welcome to them, but edged out of their way to let them pass. In the village, little groups of men joined them until they became a sizable company. They walked silently. As each of the 6 men got to his compound, he turned in, taking some of the crowd with him. The village was astir in a silent, suppressed way. Ezinma had prepared some food for her father as soon as news spread that the 6 men would be released. She took it to him in his obi. He ate absent-mindedly. He had no appetite. He only ate to please her. His male relations and friends had gathered in his obi, and Obreka was arguing him to eat. Nobody else spoke, but they noticed the long strips on Okonko's back, where the warders whip and cut into his flesh. The village crier was abroad again in the night. He beat his iron gong and announced that another meeting would be held in the morning. Everyone knew that Umofia was at last going to speak its mind about the things that were happening. Okonko slept very little that night. The bitterness in his heart was now mixed with a kind of childlike excitement. Before he had gone to bed, he had brought down his war dress, which he had not touched since his return from exile. He had shaken out his smoked raffia skirt and examined his tall feather headgear and his shield. They were all satisfactory, he had thought. As he lay on his bamboo bed, he thought about the treatment he had received in the white man's court, and he wore vengeance. In Umofia, if Umofia decided on war, all would be well. But if they chose to be cowards, he'd go out and avenge himself. He thought about wars in the past. The noblest, he thought, was the war against Isike. In those days, Okudo was still alive. Okudo sang a war song in a way that no other man could. He was not a fighter, but his voice turned every man into a lion. Worthy men are no more, Okonko sighed as he remembered those days. Isike will never forget how he slaughtered them in that war. We killed 12 of their men and they killed only 2 of ours. Before the end of the 4th market week, they were suing for peace. Those were days when men were men. As he thought of these things, he heard the sound of the iron gong in the distance. He listened carefully and could just hear the choir's voice, but it was very faint. He turned on his bed and his back hurt him. He ground his teeth. The choir was drawing nearer and nearer until he passed by Okonko's compound. The greatest obstacle in Umofia, Okonko thought bitterly. It's that coward, Egonang. His sweet tongue can hang fire into cold ash. When he speaks, he moves our men to impotence. If they had ignored his womanish wisdom 5 years ago, we would not have come to this. He ground his teeth. Tomorrow he will tell them that our fathers never fought a war of blame. If they listen to him, I shall leave them and plan my own revenge. The choir's voice had once more become faint, and the distance had taken the harsh edge of his iron gong. Okonko turned from one side to the other and derived a kind of pleasure from the pain his back gave him. Let Egonami talk about a war of blame. Tomorrow, and I shall show him my back and head. He ground his teeth. The marketplace began to fill as soon as the sun rose. Obreka was waiting in his obi when Okonko came along and called him. He hung his goatskin bag and his shelf machete on his shoulder and went out to join him. Obreka's hut was close to the road, and he saw every man who passed to the marketplace. He had exchanged greetings with many who had already passed that morning. When Okonkwo and Obreka got to the meeting place, there were already so many people that if one threw up a grain of sand, it would not find its way to the earth again. And many more people were coming from every quarter of the 9 villages. It warmed Okonkwo's heart to see such strength of numbers. But he was looking for one man in particular, the man whose tongue he dreaded and despised so much. "Can you see him?" he asked Obreka. "Who?" "Egonwane," he said, his eyes roving from one corner of the huge marketplace to the other. Most of the men were seated on goatskin on the ground. A few of them sat on wooden stools they had brought with them. "No," said Obreka, casting his eyes over the crowd. "Yes, there he is, under the silk cotton tree. Are you afraid he would convince us not to fight?" "Afraid? I do not care what he does to you. I despise him and those who listen to him. I shall fight alone if I choose." They spoke at the top of their voices because everybody was talking, and it was like the sound of a great market. "I shall wait till he has spoken," Okonkwo thought, "then I shall speak." "But how do you know he will speak against war?" Obreka asked after a while. "Because I know he's a coward," said Okonkwo. Obreka did not hear the rest of what he said because at that moment somebody touched his shoulder from behind, and he turned around to shake hands and exchange greetings with 5 or 6 friends. Okonkwo did not turn around, even though he knew the voices. He was in no mood to exchange greetings. But one of the men touched him and asked about the people of his compound. "They are well," he replied without interest. The first man to speak to Mofia that morning was Okika, one of the 6 who had been imprisoned. Okika was a great man and an orator, but he did not have the booming voice which a fast speaker must use to establish silence in the assembly of the clan. Onyeka had such a voice, and so he was asked to salute Umofia before Ochika began to speak. "Umofia kwenu," he bellowed, raising his left arm and pushed the air with his open hand. "Yeah!" roared Umofia. "Umofia kwenu," he bellowed again and again and again, facing a new direction each time, and the crowd answered, "Yeah!" There was immediate silence, as though cold water had been poured on a roaring flame. Ochika sprang to his feet and also saluted his clansmen 4 times. Then he began to speak. "You all know why we are here, when we ought to be building our barns or mending our huts, when they should be putting our compounds in order. My father used to say to me, whenever you see a toad jumping in broad daylight, then know that something is after its life. When I saw you all pouring into the meeting from all the quarters of our clan so early in the morning, I knew that something was after our life." He paused for a brief moment and then began again. "All our gods are weeping. Idemile is weeping, Ogungu is weeping, Agbala is weeping, and all the others. Our dead fathers are weeping because of the shameful sacrilege they are suffering and the abomination we have all seen with our eyes." He stopped again to steady his trembling voice. "This is a great gathering. No clan can boast of greater numbers or greater valor. But we are all here. I ask you, are all the sons of Umofia with us here? A deep murmur swept through the crowd. They are not, he said. They have broken the clan and gone their several ways. We who are here this morning have remained true to our fathers, but our brothers have deserted us and joined a stranger to soil their fatherland. If we fight the stranger, we shall hit our brothers and perhaps shed the blood of a clansman. But we must do it. Our fathers never dreamt of such a thing. They never killed their brothers, but a white man never came to them. So we must do that what our fathers would never have done. Eneke, the bird, was asked why he was always on the wing, and he replied, "Men have learned to shoot without missing their mark, and I have learned to fly without perching on a twig. We must root out the evil. And if our brothers take the side of evil, we must root them out too. And we must do it now. We must bail this water now that it is only ankle deep." At this point, there was a sudden stir in the crowd, and every eye turned in one direction. There was a sharp bend in the road that led from the marketplace to the white man's court and to the stream beyond it, and so no one had seen the approach of the 5 court messengers until they had come around the bend, a few paces from the edge of the crowd. Okonko was sitting at the edge. He sprang to his feet as soon as he saw who it was. He confronted the head messenger, trembling with hate, unable to utter a word. The man was fearless and stood his ground. His 4 men lined up behind him. In that brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. Waiting there was utter silence. The men of Umofia were merged into the mute backcloth of trees and giant creepers waiting. The spell was broken by the head messenger. "Let me pass," he ordered. "What do you want here?" "The white man whose power you know too well has ordered this meeting to stop." In a flash, Okonko drew his machete. The messenger crouched to avoid the blow. It was useless. Okonko's machete descended twice, and the man's head lay beside his uniformed body. The waiting backcloth jumped into tumultuous life, and the meeting was stopped. Okonko stood looking at the dead man. He knew that Umofia would not go to war. He knew because he had let the other messengers escape. They had broken into tumult instead of action. He discerned fright in that tumult. He heard voices asking, why did he do it? He wiped his machete on the sand and went away. Chapter 25. When the district commissioner arrived at Okonko's compound, at the head of an armed band of soldiers and court messengers, he found a small crowd of men sitting wearily in the lobby. He commanded them to come outside, and they obeyed without a murmur. "Which among you is called Okonko?" he asked through his interpreter. "He is not here," replied Obrieka. "Where is he?" "He is not here." The commissioner became angry and red in the face. He warned the men that unless they produced Okonko forthwith, he would lock them all up. The men murmured among themselves, and Obrieka spoke again. "We can take you where he is, and perhaps your men will help us." The commissioner did not understand what Obrieka meant when he said, "Perhaps your men will help us." One of the most infuriating habits of these people was their love of superfluous words, he thought. Obreka with 5 or 6 others led the way. The commissioner and his men followed, their firearms held at the ready. He had warned Obreka that if he and his men played any monkey tricks, they would be shot, and so they went. There was a small bush behind Okoko's compound. The only opening into this bush from the compound was a little round hole in the red earth wall, through which fowls went in and out in their endless searching for food. The hole would not let a man through it. It was to this bush that Obreka led the commissioner and his men. They skirted around the compound, keeping close to the wall. The only sound they made was with their feet as they crushed dry leaves. When they came to the tree from which Okonko's body was dangling, and they stopped dead. "Perhaps your men can help us bring him down and bury him," said Obreka. "We have sent for strangers from another village to do it for us, but they may be a long time coming." The district commissioner changed intensely. The resolute administrator in him gave way to the student of primitive customs. "Why can't you take him down yourselves?" asked the commissioner. "It is against our customs," said one of the men. "It is against our custom," said one of them. "It is an abomination for a man to take his own life. It is an offense against the earth, and a man who commits it will not be buried by his clansmen. His body is evil, and only strangers may touch it. That is why we ask your people to bring him down, because you are strangers." "Will you bury him like any other man?" asked the commissioner. "We cannot bury him, only strangers can. We shall pay your men to do it. When he has been buried, we will then do our duty to him. We shall make sacrifice to cleanse the desecrated land." Obreka, who had been gazing steadily at his friend's dangling body, turned suddenly to the district commissioner and said ferociously, "That man was one of the greatest men in Omofia. You drove him to kill himself, and now he will be buried like a dog." He could not say any more. His voice trembled and choked his words. "Shut up!" shouted one of the messengers, quite unnecessarily. "Take down the body," the commissioner ordered his chief messenger, "and bring it and all these people to the court." "Yes, sir," the messenger said, saluting. The commissioner went away, taking 3 or 4 of the soldiers with him. In the many years in which he had toiled to bring civilization to different parts of Africa, he had learnt a number of things. One of them was that a district commissioner must never attend to such undecipherable details as cutting down a hanged man from the tree. Such attention would give the natives a poor opinion of him. In the book which he planned to write, he would stress that point. As he walked back to the court, he thought about that book. Every day brought him some new material. The story of this man who had killed a messenger and hanged himself would make interesting reading. One could almost write a whole chapter of him. Perhaps not a whole chapter, but a reasonable paragraph at any rate. There was so much else to include, and one must be firm in cutting out details. He had already chosen the title of the book. After much thought, "The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger. End of Things Fall Apart" by CHINUA Achebe. Kindly subscribe, share, like, and comment, and tell me which book you'd like me to read next. Love you.